to my channel. Today's video I am really excited to share with you all. In today's video I will be discussing my top favorite books of all time. Now this list is always subject to change. This is more like my top favorite books up until now, I would say, because this list is always changing as I read more books over the years, but these are my favorite books of all time up until this point in my life at least. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The first book that I want to talk about on this list is Inkheart by Karenina. Now this book I read when I was around, I want to say 12, and it is one of the first fantasy books I read as a kid, and I absolutely fell in love with it from the very beginning. The story follows Maggie, a 12-year-old girl who one night sees a mysterious stranger outside of her home, and when he enters, he gives her father this strange book that they both seem at the same time kind of terrified and enamored with. And she doesn't really know where this book comes from or what it is, but she is drawn to what it means, and she finds out that her father has been keeping a secret from her whole life and delves into this magical world. This book is very whimsical and magical and just, I would say, full of wonder. The writing is very fantastical and whimsical and just really draws you in. And while it is a middle grade book, it is something that I think can be enjoyed at any age if you love magic and you love fantasy books, and also if you just love books in general, because the main characters, who are very lovable and enjoyable, are lovers of books as well, and they spend a lot of time describing their love of books and why they enjoy to read so much. And it's just really fun to read, and I would highly recommend this story. The next book I'm going to talk about is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I read this book also when I was a kid. I think I was in junior high when I read it. I actually read it for a book club at school, and I absolutely loved it from the first time that I read it up until now, and I have reread it multiple times. It is just such a fantastic story, and I definitely relate to the main character Anne, as she is this very talkative, imaginative young girl. And while I was very shy and still am as a child, I definitely could relate to the imaginative side of her and how she would let her thoughts kind of carry her away and get away from her and daydream and all of those things. I could definitely relate to that with her character. So Anne of Green Gables follows a young orphan named Anne, and she is adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. They are two siblings that live together in this farm in Green Gables in Canada, and she goes to live with them at this farm and starts her new life there as their adopted child at Green Gables. And she makes new friends, she overcomes a lot of obstacles, dealing with how she's always kind of getting herself into trouble with her imagination that gets away from her constantly, but also with things that she's very good at and how she can prove herself to be this really amazing person that has a lot of great qualities and a lot of skills as well. And it's just a very comforting and cozy book, I feel, and yeah, I just have always loved it. The next book I'm going to be talking about, if you know me at all, is absolutely no surprise to anybody. And that book is The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. I have always loved this book. This is one that I picked up after I had seen the Broadway musical, which is what kind of first sparked my love and my interest in this story. So I saw the musical when I was around 13 and absolutely loved it. I watched the 2011 25th anniversary and absolutely loved that and still do. And I really wanted to delve into the novel next, so I think around the time I was either high school or early college, I can't remember which, but I started to read this and fell in love with it immediately. And the great thing about this book is it's so rereadable because it is so short and it just reads so easily. I think it's a very accessible classic novel for anybody to read. I think it's a good starter classic novel if maybe you've never read a story from that time period before. I think that this is a good one to start with because the writing is very easy to understand, very accessible, and also just very engaging. The way that Gaston Leroux writes is in a way that just draws you in immediately from the very first sentence, and I have just always loved reading this book. So the story of Phantom of the Opera follows a young woman named Christine Daae, and she is a dancer at a opera house in Paris. She actually develops into an incredible singer thanks to the help of the opera ghost Eric, and this mysterious man that haunts the opera house has been kind of helping her find her voice and helping her with her singing. And when her childhood friend Howl returns and starts to take an interest in her, he reacts in a very violent and unpleasant way. But it is so much more than that. It is Gothic literature. It is about misunderstanding people. It is about feeling unwanted, feeling ostracized. It is about love, and I love a lot of different adaptations just of this story in general. Hello, it is me editing now, and I'm realizing that part of this video actually the focus on the camera got all messed up and I'm not in focus. So for two of these books, I'm going to talk about them here and now. So the next book I want to talk about is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I read this, I want to say about 2 years ago, and I just absolutely loved it. This is the story of two characters. We follow Anna Karenina and then we follow Levin, and their experiences with falling in love or dealing with love and with heartbreak and with family issues and societal issues and class issues and all of that. And the book is just absolutely phenomenal. I loved this story so much. I read it pretty quickly for how big it is and everything, and it didn't read, to me at least, dense at all. It was a really great read, and the story is just so engaging that I was able to just read it so quickly and be fully entertained the whole time and fully into the story. It's an absolutely fantastic novel, and you should definitely check it out. One of my absolute favorites. The next book I'll be talking about is The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I just cannot tell you how much I love this book. It is just incredible. This story follows our main character, Nari, while she is living in 18th century Cairo, and she is a con woman. And one day she is performing this ritual, and she's conning the people. It's not a real ritual, but she accidentally summons an actual djinn, and this djinn spirits her away to the world of djinn, and she finds out more about her past and her history with this world, and it is just such a fantastical read. Her writing is incredible. I would read anything that she wrote. I absolutely love this entire trilogy, and honestly, they just get better and better with each book. Each book just gets better and better. The characters are so great to follow, and they all have their own flaws and feel very real. So I would highly recommend this series for anybody that loves fantasy. The next book I have to talk about is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This also includes the sequel, The Wise Man's Fear. I absolutely love this book. I read this in college. I will be honest, I have not reread it since, so I don't know how well it holds up for me, but I do remember just absolutely adoring this book when I read it. And it is just an incredible fantasy story. This story follows the main character, Quoth, and he is recounting his life to these two people at the beginning of the story, and you see it go all the way from when he's a child up until, well, it's supposed to be up until present day, but the third book still hasn't come out, and we don't really know if it's ever going to come out, but you're finding out how he became this legendary person that everybody knows about, and how he came to be. You follow him through childhood, through his time studying at the university, and his life after that, and it is such a compelling, engaging story from the beginning. I will say one criticism I have about these books is that there's not great female representation in it. There are very few female characters, and really the main female character that we see, she is mainly a love interest and really falls into that trope and doesn't really go anywhere outside of that stereotype, which is a shame, but it is still a really enjoyable read. The next book I'm going to be talking about is The Shining by Stephen King. Now this was actually a really close tie for me between The Shining and It by Stephen King, but ultimately I decided to go with The Shining because it was the first Stephen King book I ever read, and it really made me fall in love with his books and his writing and his stories. The Shining follows Jack Torrance, who is taking his family to the Overlook Hotel to watch it for the winter season while it is closed. And while he is there, he begins to experience these supernatural presence that kind of overtakes him and makes him want to do things he wouldn't normally do and drives him to act in certain ways that are violent and unpredictable. Now this story really focuses on a lot of different family themes and concepts, and the characters are just very well developed and ones that you immediately are along for the ride for. Again, they all have their faults. They are all having their issues, except maybe Danny because he's, you know, a 5-year-old child or however old he is, but they all have their faults and are very flawed characters that you can't help but to just latch onto and want to see what happens with them till the very end. It is a story about family, ultimately. Very, very different from the movie. If you've only seen the film, it is almost a completely different story. Maybe the basic concept is there, but other than that, it is very different. The characters are very, very different. I like the film as well, but I see it as a separate entity from the book. Honestly, they're very different. But it is a great, great story. The next book I'll be talking about is The Golden Compass, or just in general, his Dark Material series by Philip Pullman. These books I read while I was on tour with Missoula Children's Theater, and while I was on tour, I flew through all 3 books because they were just so incredible and so entertaining. The books follow a young girl named Lyra, and she lives in this kind of alternative world in this alternative London, and her adventure begins when her friend Roger is taken and she doesn't know what happened to him, and she tries to find out. These books and the world that are created are so powerful and alive on the page, and you just really can feel yourself in the world that Philip Pullman has created, and a lot of the themes it explores and the characters are just so wonderful, and you can't help but just want to root for Lyra and watch her as she goes through these struggles and this adventure to find out what happened to her friend and to save him. They are a great series of books and I highly recommend them. They're very dark for children's books and follow some heavy topics, but they are great nonetheless. Next, I'll be talking about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, and really just the entire Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. I have said this before, I do not like J.K. Rowling. I do not condone what she has said. I do not agree with her, but I just want to say that these books still have had such an impact on me from when I was a child and I first read them up until now. I've reread them many times, and I can't not include them because they do still hold a really special place in my heart despite what the author has come out and said and stated and things that I do not agree with her with. I still really love these books. Harry Potter follows the story of a young boy who finds out that he is a wizard, and he goes off to the school Hogwarts of Witchcraft and Wizardry to study magic. And there he goes on all sorts of adventures and finds out things about the wizarding world and magic, and it is a great story. Highly entertaining, highly engaging, definitely recommend, but I do understand people's reluctance to read it with things that have come out about the author. And the final book I'm going to be talking about today is Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I love this book. It is also one that has a very famous, well-known movie, but the movie is also very, very different from the book. I absolutely love both of them, but they are very different. Howl's Moving Castle follows the story of Sophie Hatter, a young woman who runs a hat shop, and one day she has an encounter with the wizard Howl, and after that she actually has a curse placed on her by a witch where she is turned into an old woman, and she finds solace in Howl's Moving Castle with the characters there and with Howl himself. And the book is great. I love Sophie and Howl's relationship. It's very different, like I said, from the movie. They bicker a lot. They have this very interesting relationship in the book, and it is very entertaining and just very magical and whimsical and just one of my favorite books of all time. Alright, so that will conclude this video. I really hope you enjoyed hearing about my top favorite books of all time. I really loved making it and getting to talk about my favorite books of all time. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and, of course, give the video a thumbs up because it really helps me out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!